OpenAI offers the U.S. government a $42 billion ownership stake. Anthropic restores Fable 5. Meta prepares to become a cloud provider. And Japan unveils a bold plan for 10 million AI-powered robots. Welcome to DJAMGAMIND Daily AI Intelligence for Thursday, July 2026. I'm Anna. This podcast is researched and produced by Etienne Newman, senior software engineer and founder at DJAMGAMIND. Today's headlines suggest that artificial intelligence is entering a new strategic era. Governments are no longer acting solely as regulators. They are becoming potential stakeholders. AI companies are evolving beyond software into infrastructure providers, and nations around the world are investing heavily in sovereign AI capabilities to secure their economic future. We'll also examine Anthropic's latest advances in scientific research, Nvidia's innovative approach to financing AI startups, and why autonomous AI agents continue climbing the value chain in knowledge work. Today's stories show that AI is rapidly becoming a cornerstone of economic policy, industrial strategy, and scientific innovation. Let's unravel the future.
Historically, when you look back at how massive empires negotiated their borders or settled their treaties, it was always about land.
Right. Physical territory.
Exactly. It was about physical resources.
Yeah.
Gold, grain, access to a deep water port. You would trade actual physical territory to buy peace, or, you'd offer a tribute of silver just to keep a hostile army at bay. It was very visible.
Yeah, you could point right to it on a map. The currency of geopolitical power was always something you could literally lock in a vault or defend with a wall.
But today, if you're looking closely at the undercurrents of the tech industry, those maps have been completely redrawn. The currency is mutated. We're watching modern empires negotiate, but they aren't trading land.
No, they're trading server racks.
Server racks, computing limits, and the underlying mathematical weights that make artificial intelligence actually function. So welcome to today's deep dive. Today we are conducting a forensic autopsy on the macroeconomic compute flows and sovereign infrastructure developments for July 2nd, 2026.
It's a massive day for the industry.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I want to note right at the top that this deep dive is researched and produced by Etienne Newman, professional engineer and founder at DJAMGAMIND, on behalf of the DJAMGAMIND Audio Intelligence Network. We are looking at a tech industry today that is actively attempting to negotiate a very uneasy peace with a state apparatus that's growing increasingly hostile to its power.
Yeah, and to really decode what's happening today, it requires a deeply analytical and, frankly, a pretty cynical perspective.
Absolutely.
Because, what is currently being branded in these shiny press releases as corporate partnerships with government agencies, well, it bears a striking, almost textbook resemblance to regulatory capture and geopolitical appeasement.
Yeah, let's start with the sheer scale of the money moving across the board to secure that appeasement, because we have a massive report from the Financial Times regarding OpenAI. According to the reporting, OpenAI has offered the U.S. government a straight-up 5% ownership stake in the company.
Which is just wild. To understand the weight of that, you really have to look at the math. 3 months ago, investors placed an $852 billion valuation on OpenAI.
Wow.
Right. So that means this 5% stake they are floating to the federal government is worth roughly $42.6 billion.
$42.6 billion. And Sam Altman isn't keeping this strategy to himself either. He is reportedly pushing the leaders of Google, Meta, and Anthropic to hand over similar 5% cuts.
Yeah, a unified front.
Exactly. He's actually been discussing this exact architecture with President Trump, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent.
And then, of course, you have the other side of the legislative spectrum.
Right, Senator Bernie Sanders, who has completely dismissed this equity idea. Instead, Sanders is arguing for a one-off 50% tax on the shares of OpenAI, Anthropic, and XAI. Yeah. Actually, wait, let me just pause here for a second, because this is a critical rule for us and for you listening. We are impartially reporting these politically charged viewpoints from the sources. We are taking absolutely no sides here, and we're simply conveying the original source material without any endorsement.
Absolutely. We are just looking at the mechanics.
Yeah.
But it is a fascinating structural contrast in how to, govern the future.
Right.
On one side, the Trump administration and Silicon Valley executives are exploring this sovereign wealth model where the government becomes a shareholder. That aligns the government's financial interests directly with the company's success.
Because if the company makes money, the government makes money.
Exactly. And on the exact opposite side of the spectrum, Senator Sanders is arguing for a punitive redistribution model. But regardless of where you fall politically, the sheer scale of the money involved, it forces us to look at how this entirely changes the relationship between a private corporation and a nation state.
Yeah, I mean, you are essentially giving the state a multi-billion-dollar vested interest in making sure your company doesn't get shut down. Which actually brings us to a different version of this new sovereignty settlement, playing out this very week with Anthropic.
Oh, the Fable 5 saga.
Yes. For the last 18 days, the U.S. Department of Commerce has enforced a strict export ban on Anthropic's most powerful model, Fable 5. Today, that ban is finally lifted. Fable 5 is back online. But it did not come back without some serious duct tape.
Yeah, the surgical nature of the fix is really what stands out here. The initial export ban was triggered because some Amazon researchers found a workaround.
Right.
It was a way to push past Fable's safety guardrails to essentially identify critical software vulnerabilities. So to get Fable 5 back online, Anthropic had to build and implement a highly specific safety filter.
How does that filter actually work in practice?
Think of it like a bouncer at a club who is trained to look for one very, very specific type of fake ID, and they ignore everything else. This filter is tuned to block that exact vulnerability identification technique over 99% of the time.
Wow, 99%.
Yeah, and if a user triggers it, they get a notice, and the system just automatically reroutes their request to an older, less capable model. In this case, Opus 4.8.
And even with that bouncer at the door, Fable 5 is returning with a pretty noticeable limp. Paid users are getting their weekly limit slashed in half until July 7th. But wait, you're calling this a massive geopolitical shift, but isn't implementing a safety filter just, I don't know, standard compliance? I mean, why shouldn't the government step in and demand a fix if a machine can find critical software vulnerabilities?
Well, implementing a filter is standard compliance, sure, but the true cynical concession here wasn't the filter itself.
Yeah.
To exit the standoff, Anthropic had to make commitments granting the U.S. government pre-release access to their future models.
So they get to look under the hood before anyone else even sees it.
Precisely. That is the massive concession. It fundamentally alters the pipeline of innovation when the state gets a private viewing of your technology before it hits the open market. And you can see the chilling effect this has already created if you look closely at Anthropic's launch of their new mid-tier model.
Right, Claude Sonnet 5, which happened right in the shadow of this whole Fable 5 expert ban saga.
Yeah.
And on paper, Sonnet 5 looks incredibly powerful for a mid-tier release.
Oh, absolutely.
It's highly agentic, and by agentic, I mean it doesn't just generate text. It can operate a web browser, it can run commands in a terminal, it can act on your behalf, and they priced it at just $2 per $1 million input tokens and $10 for output until August 31st.
Which is basically undercutting the market.
Completely. They claim it even beats their previous flagship model, Opus 4.8, in knowledge work. But there is a glaring omission in what it can do.
Yeah, conspicuously, Sonnet 5 actually scores worse than its older predecessor, Sonnet 4.6, on cybersecurity benchmarks.
Which makes no sense for a newer model.
Exactly. But Anthropic openly admitted they deliberately avoided training Sonnet 5 on those specific cybersecurity tasks.
Wait, they intentionally kneecapped their own product?
Yes. They degraded their own capabilities to sidestep the regulatory hammer. I mean, in this industry, labs are usually accused of doing everything they can to artificially inflate their benchmark scores.
Right. They want to be number one on the leaderboard.
Right. But here, Anthropic is intentionally suppressing their model's capabilities in a highly scrutinized domain just to avoid triggering another government ban. It's the absolute definition of a chilling effect.
I mean, imagine you're running one of these frontier labs. You are offering up $42 billion equity stakes. You are granting federal agencies VIP access to your unreleased products. You are intentionally downgrading your own software.
Yeah.
It feels like we're watching the creation of digital vassal states. These tech empires are just paying tribute to a sovereign king. I have to ask, is this actual ideological alignment? Or is it just a $42.6 billion protection racket, a pragmatically priced ticket just to buy political goodwill?
Honestly, it's the pragmatic cost of survival at the frontier of technology right now. But to understand why they are so terrified of losing their operational licenses, why they will offer equity and intentionally nerf their own products just to keep operating, you really have to look beneath the software.
The actual hardware.
Yes. You can't appease the government if you run out of money. The real geopolitical leverage, the thing that actually pays for all of this, isn't the software itself. It's the massive physical computing power required to run it. The underlying economics of generative AI have completely mutated.
Well, generative AI has officially ballooned into a $110 billion industry. But the physical reality of building out the data centers, securing the power grids, getting all that online, it is drastically outpacing the supply.
Compute is a runaway train.
Exactly. We're seeing OpenAI frantically searching for efficiencies. They just announced they found a quote-unquote compute multiplier to basically halve their inference costs, and they're rolling that out alongside their new in-house jalapeno chip.
Which is just a desperate measure to stretch their resources. I mean, a compute multiplier is essentially a software shortcut. It lets them process a prompt using half the physical computing power they used to need.
Right.
In this industry, having your inference cost is the equivalent of suddenly engineering your fleet of delivery trucks to get double the gas mileage overnight. They have to do this because raw compute is becoming the supreme global currency.
And this dynamic is forcing a pretty radical pivot among the biggest players. Let's look at Meta. They have made a staggering $182.9 billion infrastructure bet on AI over the last few years.
That is an unbelievable amount of capital.
It is. But if we're honest, their internal AI software efforts haven't really dominated the market in a way that justifies spending nearly $200 billion.
No, so they are pivoting the business model. Meta is reportedly prepping an internal plan to simply rent out their spare AI data center capacity.
Meta Compute.
Yes, Meta Compute. This initiative is being led by their infrastructure chief, Santosh Janardhan, Meta Superintelligence Labs head Daniel Gross, and company president Dina Powell-McCormick. Instead of just trying to build the best chatbot, they are going to rent raw compute and charge outside developers to tap into Meta-hosted models, like their new Muse Spark.
And Wall Street absolutely loved this idea. I mean, this plan alone pushed Meta stock up 9.3%. Because it gives investors a massive financial hedge.
Exactly.
If Meta's own models don't ultimately win the great AI software race, it doesn't matter. They still own the physical infrastructure that the rest of the industry desperately needs to survive. They are mutating into an infrastructure rentier.
And taking a toll on the rest of the economy. We are actually seeing Nvidia execute this exact same playbook, but on an even more aggressive scale. Nvidia is no longer satisfied just manufacturing and selling chips.
Right. They launched that new partnership program?
Yeah. Instead of just taking cash for GPUs, they are trading GPU access and token credits to startups in exchange for a direct cut of those startups' future product and cloud revenue.
Wait, so NVIDIA isn't just selling the pickaxes during the gold rush anymore. They're telling the miner, I will give you the pickaxe, but I want a cut of the gold you find, and I want partial equity in your mine just for the privilege of letting you dig.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. They are operating like a feudal landlord, and they can demand these terms because of how scarce GPU access is right now. Just look at the scale of this. Their initial partners include a company called Sharon AI in Australia, which is deploying up to 40,000 NVIDIA GPUs under this model.
Wow.
And Firmus Technologies is building a data center in Indonesia that will house up to 170,000 GPUs. NVIDIA is locking in revenue-sharing agreements on the very infrastructure they're helping to stand up.
170,000 GPUs. I mean, to understand why a startup would ever agree to give up their equity and their future revenue just to get access to servers, you have to contextualize how explosive the economic value of this compute is right now.
The demand is insatiable.
Right. Look at the remote labor index that the Center for AI Safety just released. They test AI agents on real, complex freelance jobs.
And the model that was just unbanned, Fable 5, posted the highest score ever recorded on that index. It matched or beat human professionals on 16.1% of those freelance projects.
A year ago, the industry leader was at 2.5%. That is a 6x jump at the frontier in a single year. The rush to capture that value is absolute madness. AWS is committing $1 billion just to embed thousands of their engineers directly into customer teams.
Yeah, everyone wants a piece of the deployment layer.
And Google is flooding the lower-end market to capture bulk workflows, releasing these cheap, fast pipelines like Nano Banana 2 Lite, which generates images in 4 seconds for like 3 cents, and Gemini Omni Flash.
It's an absolute gold rush. But, the entities realizing the most consistent profits aren't the ones panning for gold. They're the landlords owning the river. Frontier Labs are realizing that being an infrastructure rentier is a much safer, far more lucrative bet than trying to win the AI software arms race.
Yeah, because a software model can be obsolete in a week.
Exactly. But the physical data centers, those are absolute prerequisites. When raw compute becomes the supreme currency, the physical supply chains that build the servers become the most critical choke points on Earth.
And there is a fatal flaw in this rentier strategy, right? It relies entirely on those physical supply chains. You can negotiate all the software limits and data center capacity you want, but you still need raw physical components.
Zen and metal.
Exactly. And the global supply chain is buckling under the weight. Apple is widely considered the undisputed king of global supply chain management, but they actually had to raise prices on Macs and iPads in June, specifically because of a global memory shortage.
Yeah, and now the situation is so tight that Apple is reportedly lobbying the U.S. government, specifically the Trump administration, for clearance to purchase RAM from two blacklisted Chinese memory makers.
CXMT and YMTC.
Right, companies that are currently sitting on the government's ban list.
Apple, the wealthiest company on Earth, wants permission to use banned Chinese chips just to keep up with the component costs for the products they sell in China. The desperation for raw materials is overriding all geopolitical boundaries.
Well, the reason memory chips are suddenly so scarce is that hardware demands are morphing everywhere. It's not just massive data centers consuming these resources anymore.
Right. Consumer hardware is undergoing a massive shift. Apple is upping the production target for a new foldable iPhone Ultra to 10 million units, which analysts say will cost between $2,500 and $3,000.
Incredible pricing.
And SpaceX is currently running a roadshow for a slim folding AI handset integrated entirely with XAI. Even physical media is dead. Sony just announced they are ceasing all PlayStation game disc production by 2028. Everything is shifting to massive digital downloads and AI-integrated processing, which just eats up local memory.
And while consumer tech companies fight over memory chips, nation-states are waking up to their own extreme vulnerabilities. They were realizing they cannot rely on American corporate infrastructure. Look at what is happening in Japan with the No-H Consortium.
This is a massive group, including SoftBank and Sony, right? Backed by $6 billion in government funding.
Yep. But they aren't trying to build another chatbot. They're focusing entirely on physical AI. Japan has a rapidly aging population, so their explicit strategy with the No-H Consortium is to build and deploy 10 million AI-equipped robots across different sectors by 2040.
10 million robots.
Exactly. The geopolitical strategy is to cut their reliance on U.S. and Chinese models. They want sovereign control over the physical labor force of the future.
The contrast here is staggering. While global hardware fractures and countries like Japan are building armies of physical robots to secure their independence, the American software labs are digging deeper into the physical sciences.
Anthropic's Claude Sonnet?
Right. Anthropic just launched Claude Science, which is this unified hub linking over 60 different scientific sources for researchers with localized data storage. They even started a preclinical drug discovery program for neglected diseases, and they brought in DeepMind's Nobel winner, John Jumper, to help lead it.
So you have software that is analyzing proteins and driving preclinical drug discovery at unprecedented speeds.
But it really exposes the ultimate fragility of this entire empire. I mean, on one hand, we have software that can literally help cure diseases. On the other hand, Apple is so desperate for raw materials, they are begging Washington to let them buy banned chips. We are building a superintelligence, but we're literally running out of the basic physical sand and metal required to power it.
Yeah. The rentiers we talked about earlier, Meta, Nvidia, they are building their multi-billion-dollar castles on a foundation of incredibly strained global logistics.
It's just wild to think about. Let's synthesize what we've uncovered in today's autopsy. We have traced the macroeconomic flow of compute today, from OpenAI offering a $42.6 billion bribe to secure political peace, to Anthropic trading pre-release access to the government just to get Fable 5 unbanned.
And we watched Meta and Nvidia mutate into these infrastructure rentiers.
Right, because controlling raw compute is safer than fighting the software wars. And we follow that all the way down to a supply chain so stressed that Apple is negotiating with blacklisted manufacturers.
It proves that the territory of the modern empire really is the servo rack.
Which leaves us with a chilling, pretty clinical final thought for you to mull over. We are watching nation-states take literal equity stakes in private companies and demand pre-release access just to secure their grip on computing power today. But what happens in a few years? What happens when a private tech monopoly inevitably amasses more raw compute, and by extension, more geopolitical leverage, than the very governments that are currently trying to regulate them?
When the compute vault of a corporation becomes larger and more influential than a national treasury, well, the balance of global power shifts entirely.
The maps will be redrawn all over again. I want to remind everyone that this deep dive was researched and produced by Etienne Newman, professional engineer and founder at DJAMGAMIND, on behalf of the DJAMGAMIND Audio Intelligence Network. Keep analyzing the infrastructure beneath the headlines, and we will see you on the next deep dive.
That concludes today's DJAMGAMIND Daily AI Intelligence Briefing. The biggest takeaway is that artificial intelligence is becoming part of the strategic foundation of modern economies. Today's headlines weren't just about faster models or better benchmarks. They were about governments, infrastructure, scientific discovery, sovereign investment, and long-term national competitiveness. As AI becomes increasingly embedded in healthcare, manufacturing, cloud computing, robotics, and public policy, success will depend not only on innovation, but also on collaboration between governments, researchers, enterprises, and technology providers. The future belongs to those who can build trusted ecosystems around intelligence. Thank you for listening. This podcast is researched and produced by Etienne Newman, senior software engineer and passionate soccer dad from Canada. If you enjoy these daily intelligence briefings, please follow the DJAMGAMIND Intelligence channel, leave a review, and share today's episode with colleagues, friends, and fellow AI enthusiasts. I'm Anna. Stay informed, stay adaptable, and keep unraveling the future.